How's it going, super friends? And welcome back to my channel, and thank you so much for joining me today for yet again another action figure review. Today we have in hand the brand new DC Essentials Supergirl and Cyborg Superman figures 16 and 17 in the DC Essentials action figure series. I've also got the Wonder Woman and the Cheetah from the exact same wave, but for today, it's all about the last daughter of Krypton and that evil, vengeful, spiteful man, Hank Henshaw, the Cyborg Superman. So the packaging for both of these, as you'll notice, I feel like a broken record, I'm always saying the same thing, it's the solid color and white motif, which is true, every single DC Essentials has that solid color with white, the name of the character on the top, the DC Collectibles logo on the bottom, and a great big window box on the front so that you can see exactly what you get on the inside. For each of them, promotional images plastered on the side of the packaging. The pictures look fantastic, if not just a little basic and grainy, but I'm not judging these figures based on the pictures on the side of the box, so I don't care. And here are both the tops of the boxes, and you know what? You would never know which one is which because they're both white with the Superman symbol on top. For the back of each packaging, we have the exact same pictures as you find on the side of the box, as well as the other figures in the wave, which we know are Wonder Woman and Cheetah. Also, each character has a little tiny bio write-up, of which I'm going to put on the screen, and you can pause it and read it if you'd like to. And finally, here is the bottom of the box. It's got gobbledygook, the 0 to 3 sad onions, don't give it to them, and the barcodes. Awesome! Now we open them and have a look. And you know what? I think I like these figures so much, I'm just going to leave them tied inside of this bubble. So we're going to do the whole review from inside that. I'm kidding. I'll take them out. So let's start with Cyborg Superman. And I know that this is a figure that a lot of people who hadn't jumped ship from the DC Essentials were really excited for. For one, we don't get very many Cyborg Superman action figures in general. And for two, this one actually looks pretty good. Like, just looking at this figure without really fiddling with it much yet, I gotta tell you that I think that this is going to be one of the very best DC Essentials. And it does seem like they've paid pretty close attention to detail. Maybe there are places where they seem to have reinterpreted things, but overall, I can look at this character and I get a really good, strong Cyborg Superman feeling from it. And that's what you want. The thing is that I think they did really well with this figure. I think that the overall appeal visually of this guy is absolutely fantastic because the cyborgian parts of his body, they've paid quite a lot of attention to detail with the shading and with the sculpting itself. Like, there probably are places on his body sculpt where they could have just opted to paint on some of the detail and they decided not to, which is very cool. The S on the chest has been painted on really nice, there's not a lot of overage there, and really, aside from this silver paint scuff on his hand, he's been painted pretty neat all the way around. Yay, that's a win for me because quite often my DC Essentials come with paint slop everywhere. This one didn't. Now looking up close at Cyborg Superman's face, I think it looks fantastic. The spit curls on the right side of his head and the Superman-esque details look nice for what they are and everything's painted really neatly. When we come to the silver and the red deco on the cyborgian parts of his face sculpt, I think that's where things begin to falter a little because they probably painted the whole face flesh color and then painted the silver on top, and so a lot of the intended detail of his face sculpt I think is filled in by the paint and it kind of gives it a little bit of a washed out look. Also, by the way, I picked up this entire wave of figures from Silver Snail in Toronto. I ordered them yesterday at like 2 in the afternoon and they showed up here at 8:30 in the morning. Great Scott, that's fast shipping. Now I'm going to get the comparison part with the DC Essential Superman figure out of the way now because I feel like it's pertinent to actually discussing this figure. So you'll notice that the color palette they've chosen for Cyborg Superman is actually just a tad darker than Superman's himself. The red is definitely more of a crimson red in comparison to a nice bright happy red, and the blue, although looking quite similar behind the lights and camera of my recording area, the Cyborg Superman's blue is actually a much darker shade of blue. Well, it's a little darker. It's definitely noticeable. Spit it out, Brad! Another notable difference is that with Cyborg Superman, his belt and trunks, they're all one sculpted piece together. And they didn't try to paint the trunks down here on the top half of his legs, which a lot of Superman fans said, that looks ridiculous. Whereas with the initial release of Superman, which I've painted the belt loops, if I'm being honest, I didn't leave those yellow. How could I leave those yellow? The belt is a separate piece that fits on top of Superman's mid area. So they've definitely, I think, listened to fans, because fans thought that that looked kind of silly right there, and they didn't want the paint lines on top of his legs. And so that's definitely a big difference. And just overall, this has so much newly sculpted detail. The fist, the forearm, the bicep, the shoulder, the chest, the abdomen, the head, and the bottom of his legs here, that's all brand new sculpted detail. They had to literally retool a whole bunch of parts, which was probably fairly expensive. Now, as for the only comparison, oh, he's really dusty. Hang on a second.
Stand still. You're all covered in shelf dust.
The only other Cyborg Superman that I have in the basic Superman style uniform is this one.
I still don't have the classic DC Direct one. It's a grail and I don't have it yet.
So that's the only one I'm going to compare him to. And now on to everyone's favorite last daughter of Krypton, Kara Zor-El, cousin to the Superman. And what do I think of her? Well, I think that she looks pretty good. The color palette, the choice is very much the same as the Cyborg Superman, opting for a bit more of a crimson red and a slightly darker blue, but not too dark. It does seem like there are a lot of reused female body parts here, like the chest, the shoulders, the arms, the forearms, the entirety of the legs, except for the feet and the fists and the skirt and the cape. Everything else from the neck down seems to be just more reused parts. I don't think it's that big of a deal, except for when it comes to the top of the boot. Well, just look at it. I mean, that's a mess. DC Collectibles, you ain't doing yourself any favors by putting this out. That's a mess. And the S on her chest, although it's not sculpted on, I can't fault them for that. I mean, I'm just as happy when they paint that on there. So it looks nice enough, and it's been painted crisply as well. So gotta give him kudos for that. And then for the face sculpt, let's look at it up close. What do you think? I don't know, you tell me. Do you get a current, contemporary, modern Kara Zor-El Supergirl feel from this? Or does she maybe just look like a valley girl with one eye that is possibly higher than the other one? Either way, at least the paint job on her face, the eyebrows, the eyes, and the lips, at least that's done neat and tidy. Yeah, I suppose it gives me damn Supergirl feels. I could see this being Kara Zor-El, contemporary to the comic books. She does seem a little bit tall, though. Let's do the comparison. As someone who buys every single super title, I can tell you that she's definitely not as tall as this in comparison to Superman. She's probably about a head shorter, if I'm being honest. And here she is in comparison to a DC Universe Classics scale Supergirl and the DC Icons. Hold up, I know she's greatly modified. New skirt, the same head, obviously, new cape. She's been all kinds of repainted, but the body scale, you'll get a good idea of the size of these figures in comparison to these. And just taking a moment to dwell on these two figures because they're both by DC Collectibles and they're both supposed to be in Supergirl's Rebirth uniform. So I'm going to compare these ones the most. And honestly, I've got to hand it to the DC Icons. The DC Icons, in my opinion, is a superior figure. For one, the DC Icons has the sculpting at the top of the boot that I really wish that one had. Also, her chest emblem, her chemblem, has been sculpted onto her uniform, and they actually put her symbol on the back of her cape. Unlike this one, which when you move her rubbery hair to the way you can see there is knit Supergirl symbol. Which face sculpt, though? You know, I'm going to have to say first off that neither of these are ideal, but I definitely like the DC Essentials face sculpt better. Cool beans! Now let's do the articulation segment. Starting with and going back to the Cyborg Superman. He's a ball peggian, his head goes around, and it's also on a hinge, looking up, looking down. Shoulders on a ball hinge, you can see it hiding in the armpit. A 360 swivel. Double crunch flexi arms. You got the little peg wrists on a hinge so they can, you know, pump and be like, Arsenio Hall! And how about that ab crunch? Down and back. Well, that's okay. That's sort of flight pose worthy, especially when you get the head involved in it. That's actually really flight pose worthy. What am I saying? As usual, we got a tornado waist 360. Groin, ball joints. Swivel, swivel. Some more double crunch in the knee department. We got the top of the boot rotation here. I used air bunnies because it is at the top of the boot on this side, just not here. I thought it was more fun to look at the shiny silver leg. And then finally we have the ever controversial, you love him, you hate him, most people hate him. We have the ball hinges. The DC Essentials ball hinges have stirred quite the controversy because they don't really do a very good job of holding the figure steady, and then you got to find just the right way to balance them, and then usually they just end up looking weird. Like, the ankles for these figures are notoriously terrible. Supergirl, on the other hand, benefits from what I feel is the more desirable female articulation. Her head is on a hinged ball peg, so of course it's going to go all the way around. It's also going to be able to look down quite a bit and also look up to get her into flight poses. Move that rubbery hair out of the way and see how far we can get it. Yeah, that's not bad actually. And then when you combine that with her abs, which is not an ab crunch, she has a ball peg there. And honestly, I prefer when females have their torso articulation handled in this way because it's less messy looking. When you put the torso and the head in the right position, yeah, that's good enough for a flight pose for me. Shoulders on a ball hinge, they go round and round along with the bicep swivels. You got the double jointed elbows, you can crunch them right up, and you got the fists on a peg hinge, yeah. Also, her groin is on ball pegs. You can turn it, you can bend it, and you can twist it because this girl's articulated. And now for Supergirl's ankles, which are actually handled better than the men's as far as I'm concerned. There's a hinge that goes forward and backwards, and it can also rotate round and round because Supergirl has simple, basic ankle pivots. The one thing that I think a lot of people who like highly articulated action figure collectors like to see, it's the ankle pivot. Take note, DC Essentials, you can do this on this. Just because it's a man doesn't mean you have to give it the crappy ankle articulation. And that is that. Articulation segment covered. So now I suppose that overall, the pair of these two don't reach action figure perfection. There is a lot to like about them. For the most part, the paint apps on both of these are very clean. Most of it's gone where it's supposed to go. And the likeness to each of the characters isn't terrible. Cyborg Superman, though not completely accurate for those of us who remember the reign of Superman, there are definitely some differences. The biggest one that I can think of is the fact that the S doesn't have that sort of black on the left-hand side of it. And I think that the DC Direct one is absolutely a better looking offering. This is still probably one of the very best Cyborg Superman figures ever offered to the general collecting public. And the same thing goes for Zor-El. There have been many Supergirl action figures, and this one is definitely one of the best. And although her likeness is not completely accurate with current contemporary comics, I feel like she's a bit too tall, and her bust is probably a little bit too big. It's still a very good attempt at bringing a contemporary Supergirl to the basic collector market. Again, I think that they're shooting themselves in the foot by not putting the sculpted detail at the top of her boots and just opting to paint it on. We can see when looking up close that that's a disaster waiting to happen. But in general, I think that she's very, very good. And both of these action figures, as said, are excellent offerings in the DC Essentials figure line. So basically, if you're a Cyborg Superman fan and a Zor-El fan, you're probably going to want to track these down. I think they're definitely reasonable action figures. They're not perfect, but they're also not garbage. They're nowhere near it. They're actually very good. But that's my story, and I'm sticking to it, so hopefully you enjoyed this video, found it useful, insightful, entertaining in some way, shape, or form. If you did, please take the time to show your support by clicking the like button. By kicking a like button. I was supposed to say clicking. By clicking the like button. Leave any comments that you have down in the comments section below. And finally, if you want to see more of my face and hands show up in your inbox, then I invite you today to become a super friend and join the DC squad by hitting the subscribe button and dinging the bell. And if you see something you like show up in your inbox, you could just take a trip on over to the channel, have a little gander, and if you like it, you could leave a comment, leave a like, and pledge your allegiance to me. That was dumb. Seriously though, come back and say hi sometime. I'd love to have you. But until that day comes, have a DC day, everybody, and take care.